Hi, students and families. My name is Carrie Temkin. I'm the outreach coordinator in the Office of Student Financial Aid at the University of Madison. And I am thrilled to be presenting this virtual information to you about the financial aid process, covering things like the FAFSA and next steps, tips and tricks, loans, grants, scholarships, and the like. So I'm glad that you're watching this presentation. Some things to note are while I do work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, everything that I share in this presentation is applicable no matter what institution you go to. I do share some specific financial aid programs to UW-Madison, but I'll make it clear when that's happening. But by and large, everything that I'm sharing is for your general information before you're applying to schools. So with that, I'll just hop right in. First of all, the absolute entry level or entryway into financial aid, accessing financial aid, is filling out the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. It is free. So if you've found yourself on a website that's asking for money, you're being bamboozled. Go somewhere else. You can find it at fafsa.gov. By and large, the majority of traditional incoming freshmen need to have parental information on the FAFSA, and for their whole undergraduate career need to have parental information on the FAFSA. So be prepared to provide that. For your senior year of high school, I imagine you might be applying to more than one institution of higher education. You don't have to fill out the FAFSA for every single school that you want to send it to. Rather, you fill it out once your senior year and you put in multiple school codes. And whatever code that you enter into the FAFSA, that is the school that will receive that information. So you only have to fill it out once your senior year of high school, but it is something that you'll have to fill out every single year based on when you'll need financial aid, even potentially into graduate school if that is the route that you want to take. There is an app. You can find it at My Student Aid. This is just the landing view. It is as secure as using the FAFSA website. You can switch back and forth between the app and the website. You could have the parent use the app and the student use the website and vice versa. So it's really versatile that way. I have heard feedback that the app makes it more clear if it's asking for student information or parent information. So that's one piece of good news there. Some general information about the FAFSA. I mentioned this already, but you can find it at fafsa.gov. And even if you just Google FAFSA, you'll be likely taken to the right place. The FAFSA uses prior tax year information. So that means if you're a senior in high school this year, you'll be starting college in 2021. So you'll be using 2019 tax information. If you're a junior in high school this year, you'll start the FAFSA next year and you'll use 2020 tax year information. However, everything else that's included in the FAFSA is as of the date that you are filling it out and signing it. So when it's asking you for your assets, it's based on the date that you're signing that FAFSA. It does become available October 1st every year. So the benefit of that is that you don't have to wait until you file your taxes to be able to do it. You can just do it October 1st of every year. If you're watching this after October 1, then the FAFSA is available now. Seniors in high school, you should be filling out the FAFSA now if you haven't already. The majority of institutions of colleges or universities have some sort of priority deadline by which they want you to fill out the FAFSA to ensure that you have access to as much financial aid as possible. UW-Madison's happens to be December 1st, but that'll be a question that you'll want to ask other institutions of when their deadline is. And as with anything, filling out the FAFSA sooner rather than later is always a good idea. So what are some things that you need to fill out the FAFSA? I'm not going to belabor this point too much. I have 2019 federal tax and W-2 information here and untaxed income records as well. I have 2019 specifically. This would be for our seniors in high school this year. And this is for students and parents. If a student has a federal tax return and W-2, have that in front of you to be able to reference when you fill out the FAFSA. Same with the parent. Student, if you didn't make enough to have to fill out the taxes, then you don't have to provide that information for the FAFSA. Any untaxed income records I listed there. And then information on savings, investments, business assets, and farm assets. You do not have to report your retirement assets on the FAFSA. So when it's talking about investments, this is talking about investments outside of your retirement. Business assets, you do not have to report business assets if you have less than 100 employees with your business. Same thing with farm. If you live on the farm or if you have less than 100 employees, you do not have to list farm assets on the FAFSA. Driver's license, if you have one, social security number. Students do need a social security number. They need to be a citizen or eligible, non-citizen, a permanent resident, if in order to access financial aid, federal financial aid. Parents do not need to have a social security number. So that's something to note. Date of birth for the parents and the student as well. And if applicable, the month and year of the parents' marriage, divorce, or separation. So another point that I want to make about this slide too is it's really helpful to gather all of this information ahead of time before you want to sit down to fill out the FAFSA. Certainly you can save the FAFSA along the way, so that's helpful. But if you gather everything in one place, you will be able to fill out the FAFSA in one sitting more likely than not. So some tips and tricks. A question that we get asked a lot is, well, what if my parents are divorced? Who do I use as the parent on the FAFSA? And the answer to that is whoever you live with the most. If custodial, if custody, physical custody is split right down the middle, then you look at what parent provides the most financial support for you. That is the parent that you use on the FAFSA. The other parent is not included on the FAFSA. If the parent that you live with the most or provides the most financial resources for you is remarried, then you also include the step parent information on the FAFSA as well, because it's looking at household resources. Next question, well, what if a student is paying for everything? Do you still need parental information? This is something that I ran into. I was a first generation college student. My parents were not able to support me in college, and my dad was just so flummoxed when I explained to him that I needed his tax information to be able to access financial aid and to be able to go to college, even though he was having nothing to do financially with supporting me in college. But it's part of federal regulation. There are some caveats to that. Students do not need to provide parental information if they're over the age of 24, if they're married, if they're in graduate school, if they have a child that they provide more than 50% of the support for, if they were orphaned after the age of 13, if they're a veteran or active military service member, or if it is impossible or unsafe for them to get parental information. And those last two circumstances, if it's impossible or unsafe, those are circumstances where they should contact the financial aid office to learn how to navigate that. Next question, well, what if my financial circumstances are different than they were when I filled out the FAFSA? So if you're starting school in September and you filled out the FAFSA last October and something changed, or what if my FAFSA, when I'm filling it out now, what if my financial circumstances have changed since I filled out my taxes 2 years ago? And certainly right now, in the middle of a pandemic, a lot of families across the nation are experiencing financial hardship. So this is particularly relevant now. Any institution that you apply to will have some sort of appeal process or special circumstance process. So after you fill out the FAFSA, you can contact the financial aid office. This will be something that you'll have to do individually for every institution that you apply for. So reach out to the institutions, say, explain that my circumstances are different than what the FAFSA shows. The office will reach out to you and likely ask for other documentation and will reassess your financial aid offer. It's not guaranteed that your financial aid offer will change, but happy to reassess and reevaluate that. A tool that will become available to you as you're filling out the FAFSA is called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool. This will be your best friend if you're able to use it. So it basically gives the FAFSA permission to suck in your information directly from the IRS and spit it back into the FAFSA. There's so many reasons to use this. The first is that it's just automatic. So there's less that you have to fill out, which means that filling out the FAFSA will go faster and there's less room for human error. So definitely use that IRS data retrieval tool. Also, about 1/3, a little less than 1/3 of all FAFSAs get flagged by the federal government randomly for verification. meaning that you have to provide extra documentation after you fill out the FAFSA to prove what you put on the FAFSA is true. If you use the IRS data retrieval tool, it significantly lowers your chances of being flagged for verification. And if you are, that verification process is a lot smoother. Verification is actually a process that you would have to go through at every institution that you're accepted to as well. The federal government is the one that flags the FAFSA, but it's individual institutions that have their own process to go through that. Next up, it is a federal website that's being used by hundreds of thousands of families across the nation, all right around the same time. So it can be glitchy. The federal student aid folks are really great at catching those glitches and fixing them quickly. But I share this for two reasons. One, if while you are filling out the FAFSA, you see that there's something just going in circles, you're not able to move forward, I invite you to breathe, save, and leave. Come back later, take a peek at it tomorrow. Likely it will be fixed by then. But then also, my other point that I want to make is don't wait until the day before the priority deadline to fill out the FAFSA. Certainly these last several months of the pandemic has proven that technology issues exist, right? I don't know about you, but I've encountered several myself. So don't wait until the last minute. There are some things that could be completely out of your control technology-wise. So plan ahead, do the FAFSA now if you can. There's a chat function while you are filling it out in the Contact Us section. So if you'd like live support, there is a live agent in that chat function ready to help you. They have late hours. I believe they're open until 10 Eastern, so pretty late into the night. I mentioned this earlier. If parents don't have a social security number, you can still fill out the FAFSA, but they have to enter all zeros for your social security number. And then also you won't be able to digitally sign the FAFSA, so you'll have to print it and physically sign it and mail it in. If you have any questions about that process, if parents don't have a social security number, please feel free to call our office. We're happy to walk you through that process. Selective service is a requirement for students who are born, who are male at birth, to fill out the FAFSA. So it'll ask you if you want, it'll ask you if you've already registered. If you haven't already registered, it will allow you to go to the site and register. And you can do that even before you turn 18. There's a process for that. FSA ID, this is something that the student will create in order to start the FAFSA, and the student and parent will each need their own FSA ID in order to digitally sign the FAFSA. It is connected to your social security number. So the student has their own and the parent has their own FSA ID. It's the same process as filling out the credentials to log in for an online bank account, for instance. You have your email address, you create a password, there are some security questions. It's pretty straightforward, but you do need to create that, and it's recommended to create that FSA ID before you even start to fill out the FAFSA. Again, both the student and the parent have their own FSA ID. Because it's linked to an email address, students, when you're creating this, don't use your high school email address, because this FSA ID will be the credential that you use all 4 years of your undergrad and even into graduate school if you go that route. And you won't have access to your high school email address at that point if you need to recover any information. Same goes for parents. Don't use your work email address because, hey, sometimes that changes too, right? So use any sort of consistent personal email address that you'll have in the next, foreseeable future. I want to give a huge shout out to a resource called College Goal Wisconsin. This is a nonprofit that helps support students and families across the state to fill out the FAFSA. They have events all throughout October and November. Typically, they are in person across the state, and they bring together financial aid administrators. So there's a short presentation going over the FAFSA, and then you can sit down right then and there, fill out the FAFSA. If you have questions along the way, there are financial aid administrators to help you with that. And the students who submit their FAFSA that evening get entered to win a scholarship drawing. This year, because of the circumstances that we are in, they are virtual events, but they're still happening all throughout October and November. So check it out if you have any questions along the way while you're filling out that FAFSA. So after you file, the results are sent electronically to the colleges that the student selects. So this is again in reference to that those school codes that I said earlier. Usually schools don't look at the information until the student is accepted though. So don't expect to get a financial aid offer before you're even accepted to the school. There might be some caveats to that, but generally speaking, that's how that works. The students and the parents will receive the initial results by usually by email, but you can select post of the FAFSA through the student aid report. This is also when you'll know if you've been selected for the verification process. Again, remember that the verification process is identified by the federal government, but it is a process that you do through each institution that you are accepted to. This is also the time that you can contact your colleges with any special circumstances or changes in circumstances. After the student is admitted to the college, a financial aid offer or package will be prepared and sent out. If you don't hear back from a college within a month of your financial aid, of your acceptance, I would contact the office and make sure that you don't need to provide any extra documentation and just make sure that everything is going smoothly. So the FAFSA, what does it even do? Why do we fill it out? This is how I like to think about it. It's this cartoon machine living in a cloud, and it sucks in all of your financial information, the student and the parent, and it spits out the expected family contribution. This is the golden number. It's the whole reason that the FAFSA is filled out, to identify the expected family contribution number. This number is not necessarily a number that's based in reality of what students and families can pay or will pay for college. Every institution uses the EFC, expected family contribution, differently. There are some institutions where the EFC is what the students and family pay. There are some institutions where the expected family contribution is matched by the institution and the family is expected to pay above and beyond that. At our institution at UW-Madison, for instance, we only use the expected family contribution to identify if you have access to federal gift aid, like the Pell Grant, which I'll talk about later on, or state grants. Everything else at our institution is based on the family adjusted gross income. So those are questions that you could be asking ahead of time to the institutions that you're applying to. How is the expected family contribution used in the financial aid offer? So again, don't think of the expected family contribution as the number that's based in reality of what you're going to pay, but it's rather an index number that the federal government uses to compare financial strength of families across the country, and then institutions choose how to use that information. Basically, it boils down to the lower your income, the more expenses, the greater your financial need is. The greater your financial need, oftentimes the more access to gift aid you have. So when we're talking about income, we're looking at student and parent income. We're looking at assets belonging to the student or the parent. I already referenced before that retirement assets are not included. Business investments under 100 employees, same with farm assets are under 100 employees are not included. The house that you live in is not included in the FAFSA either in terms of an asset, but if you have multiple homes or if you own real estate, anything that you don't live in is considered an asset and should be counted in the FAFSA. Expenses include the number of people living in the household, number of family members, excluding parents who are in college, and really everything that you enter into the FAFSA is considered in the calculation of the expected family contribution, but those are the greater determinants of the EFC. So what are the costs? We wouldn't even be talking about the FAFSA or financial aid if there weren't costs involved. I just want to point out a few things. Every school's financial aid offer is going to look a little different. So it's really important that you take your time to sit down to really understand what the financial aid offer is saying and what the costs are. And language matters too. Sometimes I hear the terms, oh, they got a free tuition or a free ride scholarship. Well, what does that mean? Like a full ride scholarship, what does that mean? Is that tuition and fees, or is that the full cost of attendance? Because there's a difference there. Usually, tuition and fees and room and board, if students are living on campus, are directly billed to the students, meaning that half is due in the fall, half is due in the spring. There's a bill and a due date that you have to pay for. But there are other things that are considered in the total cost of attendance, like transportation, like books and supplies, miscellaneous living expenses. Those last three things that are included in the cost of attendance are generally, those are numbers that are provided by the institution, but they're all based on estimates. And it's being transparent about costs that you may incur by just being a human and by being a student. And it's a baseline for a conversation around budgeting as well. So you know that you'll have a specific bill for tuition and fees and room and board if you're in the residence halls, but what else might you have to pay for throughout the year as well? Your financial need varies by school cost. So I mentioned earlier that with the FAFSA, the more expenses you have, the lower your income, the more financial need you'll have. Financial need is also a sort of a financial aid jargon term that means total cost of attendance minus your expected family contribution equals your financial need. So I've listed three different Madison schools here. Edgewood is a private institution, a four-year private institution, UW-Madison, a four-year public, and Madison College, a two-year school. So you'll see that the costs are different, but then the expected family contribution for this particular student is the same. No matter what school you go to, your expected family contribution follows you. So then your need, your financial need, is impacted by the school cost. So for our visual learners out there, the cost of attendance is variable, minus the expected family contribution is constant. So then the financial need then is variable. So what is financial aid to help cover your financial need? There are gift aid, there is gift aid and self-help aid, like loans and employment. And I'll go into all of these in more depth. But something I want to point out is that oftentimes when people think about financial aid, they only think about the gift aid, the free money, the best kind of money, right? But financial aid offers will also include self-help aid. So we'll cover all of these topics. Funding sources are the U.S. Department of Education, states, and also individual colleges and universities. So schools may offer their own scholarships or grant programs and even their own work study program or loans, with every college being different and setting up their own requirements. The differences that you can see between public and private institutions is that endowments for private institutions are larger than public. So they often have more to offer from an institutional funding perspective than public institutions, but their costs are very different too. So looking at that net price is important. All right, moving right along to gift aid, the best kind of money, the free kind of money, grants and scholarships. This is money that does not have to be paid back. Federal examples of grants include the Pell Grant and the SEOG grant, Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. You'll know if you have access to those grants after you fill out the FAFSA. It'll be included in your SAR report, your student aid report. Then I had mentioned state, institutional, regarding endowments from schools. And then there's also private scholarships, certainly from various outside organizations. Something to know about UW-Madison specifically is that anything in your financial aid offer is only based on information from your FAFSA. It's only need-based. There's nothing automatically tied to merit in your financial aid offer. So a question to ask any institution that you apply to is, how is merit funding handled? Is it part of the financial aid offer, or is it a process that I have to apply for separately? At UW-Madison, you have to apply for it separately, and you have to do that. Don't wait until you're accepted. Fill out the application for scholarships at UW-Madison before the February 1st deadline. So some tips for scholarships Plan ahead, especially your senior year in high school. You have so much going on. You're applying to colleges, right? You have family obligations. You're still trying to upkeep your high academic achievement and rigor with your senior classes. Lots going on, especially now in a pandemic, right? So it's important that you plan ahead and slot in time to pay attention to those scholarships. And take your time when you're filling them out, when you're writing your essays. It is an investment of time now that can pay off in money saved later on. Ask other people to read your essays. I know that is uncomfortable, but is a good practice to get into, especially as you are beginning your college career. Don't get scammed. Generally, websites that are asking you for money to get free money are scams. Don't get scammed. There are some national trusted search sites, or trusted national search sites, excuse me, that are listed on this slide as well. So these would be good places to check. Check with your high school counselor. See if your parents' employers have any sort of funds available. If there's a community foundation, and then cast the net wide. I would really recommend focusing on your local scholarships. Once you get into the national scholarships, yeah, there's plenty out there, but then you're also competing nationally as well. So something to keep in mind. Now I'm going to talk specifically about some programs at UW-Madison. But before I do this, questions to ask any institution you go to are, do you have any financial aid programs that you can tell me about before filling out the FAFSA or before applying to your institution? So the first at UW-Madison is called Buckys Tuition Promise. This is our promise to Wisconsin residents who are freshmen or transfer students who have a family adjusted gross income of $60,000 or less. We promise to cover tuition and fees for 4 years. If you're transferring in, we cover tuition and fees for 2 years. If the student is Pell Grant eligible, like I mentioned earlier, you would know that after filling out the FAFSA, then we meet your full financial need. Full financial need is, again, remember the total cost of attendance minus your expected family contribution. We cover that with grants, scholarships, and work study. There's no additional application. It's all based on the information right from your FAFSA. Next up is Badger Promise. This is our commitment to first generation college students who are transferring in from any 2-year UW college or liberal arts associate degree programs listed on the slide. You are a first generation college student if you don't have a parent with a 4-year degree. I'll say that again. You are a first generation college student if you do not have a parent with a 4-year degree. So if both of your parents have a 2-year degree, if you have one parent and that one parent has never gone to college, or if you have older siblings and they have a 4-year degree, but your parents don't, you are all those scenarios are first generation college student. So for students under this category, we cover tuition and fees for 1 year or 2 years if you are Pell Grant eligible. Again, no additional application. And next up is our Fast Track program. This is for our Wisconsin residents who are incoming freshmen or transfers. We meet full financial need for 8 consecutive semesters, 4 years, for our public assistance recipients. So if the student or parent is a public assistance recipient, and those are listed on the slide, then you're automatically included in this program. I do want to point out that free or reduced lunch is one of those assistance programs. There's a question about this on the FAFSA, so do fill it out as accurately as it reflects your situation on the FAFSA, because there's, again, no additional application. All right, so that wraps up the UW-Madison specific aid programs. But again, do your research, check in with the institutions that you're interested in, even the ones that you think, oh man, I don't know if I can afford that, or I don't know if I belong there. Check in, let them make that decision, right? All you can do is apply, see what happens. If you get accepted, see what the financial aid offer is, and then make your decision after that. Don't sell yourself short, because oftentimes the students or families who think that a college is out of their financial reach, oftentimes colleges have ways to support those families. So do check into that. Next up is self-help aid. This includes loans and employment. I'll talk a little bit more about both of these things. So with yeah, I'll talk about loans first. Sorry about that. So loans, there are different types. We do know that loans have to be repaid back with interest. And I do want to make a quick note here. I know that there's a large national dialogue around the student debt crisis, and it's real. It is real. But if you have to make the decision between either not going to college at all or taking out some student loans, know that student loans in and of themselves are not inherently evil, but it is an investment in your education, an investment in your future. The key component, though, is graduation. A part of the national dialogue that's often left out is that it's the students who take out a small amount of loans, under $10,000, and then don't graduate, who have the most trouble with that debt later on in life, because then they didn't graduate, so they're not getting graduate level earnings, and have trouble paying off that loan. So a key component to loans is graduate. Obviously, we want everybody to graduate. Um, Another point that I want to make about the student debt crisis is that the majority of students who are taking out large numbers of loans or large amounts of loans are professional students, doctors and lawyers. So students who later on, when they're in their career, are able to make those repayments. So anyway, I think I've belabored that enough. Loans are not evil as long as you know what you're getting yourself into, and graduate and have a plan for repayment. So any student has access to federal direct loans. Just because you have access to them does not mean that you have to take them out. There are two kinds of federal direct loans, subsidized and unsubsidized. Of the two, subsidized is better because interest does not begin accruing on those until you drop below part-time or graduate. Unsubsidized loans, interest begins accruing the moment they disperse. But for both of these types of federal direct loans, you do not have to start making payments until 6 months after you graduate or drop below part-time. That's that grace period. Right now, the interest rate is 2.75% fixed, lowest that we've ever seen. That interest rate can change year to year. And incoming freshmen have access to $5,500. Sophomores have access to $6,500, and juniors and seniors have access to $7,500. Above and beyond that, there's something called the Parent Plus loan. This is a loan that's taken out under the parent's name. It can never be transferred to the student, but it's money on behalf of the student's education. I have a toddler. She's not in college, obviously, so I couldn't take out a Parent Plus loan. Parent Plus loans are only for parents who have a dependent student in undergrad. A student would have to have a FAFSA on file for a parent to get a Parent Plus loan. There is a separate application for it. The interest rate this year is 5.3% fixed, and the origination fee, which is the fee that the federal government charges to lend, is 4.236%. So moving right along. Institutional loans, I'm not going to dive too deeply into, but this would be a question that you could ask the institutions that you're applying to. Do they offer their own loan program? What are the rates? Are they better than the federal rates? Are they better than a private loan that you could get? And institutional loans would likely be part of your financial aid offer if it's something that you're eligible for. Lastly is private loans. These are loans that are taken out under the student's name from an individual lending institution like a bank or a credit union. Again, this would be a different application. It wouldn't be automatic. The interest rate is based on the co-signer's credit. Students need a co-signer for a private loan. Majority of students need a co-signer. And so you want a co-signer that has really good credit. It could be a parent. It does not have to be. It doesn't even have to be a relative. We can't recommend one lender over another, but there is a tool on our website called Fast Choice that is a comparison tool of a lot of the popular lending institutions. But again, the interest rate that will be listed on that tool is really, it's a wide range because it's based on the co-signer's credit. So those are the options. First is subsidized or unsubsidized federal direct loans. Those are automatically included as part of your financial aid. You do not have to accept them if you do not want to. The terms and conditions, the repayment options are better with the federal direct loans. So if you're thinking about taking out a Parent Plus loan or a private loan, do take out the federal direct loans first. A little bit more about the Parent Plus loan. There is a loan limit of the cost of attendance minus any other financial aid that the student might be getting, including grants and scholarships. Repayment begins 60 days after the loan is dispersed, but there is a deferment option when you apply for it. And I already mentioned that students need to have a FAFSA on file to file for a Parent Plus loan. So let's say you apply to, a handful of institutions, you get accepted, yay, you get your financial aid offer, and let's say you get a handful of grants, you have some scholarships, perhaps you're taking out your federal direct loans and you still have a gap of your cost of attendance of maybe books and supplies, or you need a little bit more for housing outside of what you've already saved. What are some resources that you can use to fill in that gap? Most of them I've already talked about. The Parent Plus loan is one option. Again, there's a separate application for that. Private student loans is a second option. This would be a loan under the student's name. That's a separate application from an individual lending institution. Scholarships. So scholarships are not something that you should only be thinking about when you're in high school, but rather every single year you're in college to be seeking out those scholarships and funding opportunities. Hey, employment. Something that I failed to mention is about work study. Federal work study might be a part of your financial aid offer. It depends on your financial need. So not everyone has access to work study. For work study, it's just getting a job on campus. You work every other week, you work however many hours, you get paid whatever the rate is for that job. You get paid every other week, and it's up to you how to use that paycheck. But the federal government for work study pays for half of your paycheck, so employers are incentivized to hire you. That is, work study is not something that goes directly to pay tuition. There are some institutions that have their own work study programs too, so that would be a question that you could ask as well. And with employment, sometimes we get a little pushback from students and families saying, hey, yeah, I don't know if I want to work. I want to give myself some time to get acclimated to the academic rigor, to just the new environment, build community. And while getting a job is certainly a personal choice, there is a ton of research out there that shows that students who have an on-campus job their incoming freshman year do better academically and are more likely to graduate than their peers who don't, because it all comes down to time management. This might be the first time in your life as a student that you have huge gaps of time that are just they're not filled. You might have a whole day that you have no classes or nowhere that you have to be. And it is so easy to just watch that next episode on Netflix or keep playing that video game or doing whatever you like doing, than really feeling a sense of urgency around studying and paying attention to your academics. So popping in some time here and there to work helps with that time management. Hey, you also get paid, so that's great. And you meet other people that you wouldn't otherwise meet in your classes or in your residence halls. There are some other financing options as well. Check to see if the schools that you're applying to have a payment plan or an installment plan. That might be an option. And the rest of the financing options that are listed on this slide, they are things that exist in the world, but are outside of the purview of a financial aid office to really give any advice on. So if you have questions about home equity loans, life insurance policy loans, pension plan loans, or 529 plan withdrawals, I recommend you reach out to a financial planner or a certified tax accountant to get those questions answered. With that, know that our office is open and available to answer your questions. Even if you have no intention of applying to UW-Madison at all, please know that we are still here to help you along the way as you're filling out the FAFSA, as you're navigating the financial aid process, as you're understanding your financial aid offers. Please feel free to give us a call, schedule an appointment, send us an email. We are happy to help. So with that, thank you so much for watching this presentation. I do wish you and your family well in these difficult, strange times. Thank you so much. Take good care.